low blood sugars can really just impair every single cognitive process that you can imagine. So you're trying to play sports, you're trying to work out, you're trying to think during a test, you're trying to do fill in the blank thing. It's probably going to be impaired because of a low blood sugar. And I'm not going to go so far to say as it's equivalent to being drunk, but depending on how low your blood sugar is, it probably can be just about as bad. So you have to be really, really careful with this. And what happens a lot of times, it happens usually one of two ways. Number one, welcome to the Your Diabetes Insider podcast, where we take all of the mysteries of blood sugar control, focusing on nutrition, exercise, and any of the other 40 plus factors that may impact your blood sugar. If you don't know me, my name is Ben Zeal. I'm a registered dietitian, certified diabetes educator, strength and conditioning coach, and I've lived myself with type 1 diabetes for over 20 years. And I am here to share everything that I have learned in both my personal and professional experience so you can live that incredible diabetes life. So get ready and let's dive right into today's episode. What is going on? Welcome to this episode of the Your Diabetes Insider podcast, where I've got a topic that probably needed to be discussed months ago, but somehow it came up in a conversation with someone on social media. And I feel like it's a topic that deserves its entire own episode because sure, I can do it a little bit of justice in a post, and I probably will at some point, but this would be absolutely paramount, and it affects way more people with diabetes than we realize at all. And that would be none other than, drumroll please, hypoglycemia unawareness, which in simple terms is you don't feel your low blood sugars. And so you might be thinking, well, what is it like? How does that even happen? Like I always feel my low blood sugars. I get shaky, I get sweaty, I get super hungry, which yes, those are some of the most common symptoms that you can have for somebody who has a low blood sugar. But on the flip side, hypo unawareness is where you straight up do not have symptoms. You can be walking around the town, living your life, having conversations, everything seems amazing, but your blood sugar is 42 and you have no idea. And so the reason this came up is I was talking with someone on social and they said, hey, this just happened to me recently. And so I asked them to expand a little if they were willing to share. And so obviously not going to name any names, but pretty much they were living their life. Just like I said before, they were living life. They were at work. They were at their job. Everything seemed okay. Something just felt a little bit off, but nothing super definitive. And then out of nowhere, boom, they end up testing and their blood sugar was in the 40s. And that is not a good thing at all. I've had this conversation as well with other people where they say, hey, I'm at my job or I'm at school and I'm living life and everything seems amazing. And then suddenly, boom, my blood sugar was actually 54 and I have no idea how it got there. I have no idea why it got there. And now I'm suffering and paying the consequences because I have no idea that I'm low. And the thing about it is it can be extremely dangerous. Think about it, right? Low blood sugars can impair your ability to operate a car. Low blood sugars can impair your ability to think. Low blood sugars can really just impair every single cognitive process that you can imagine. So you're trying to play sports, you're trying to work out, you're trying to think during a test, you're trying to do fill in the blank thing. It's probably going to be impaired because of a low blood sugar. And I'm not going to go so far to say as it's equivalent to being drunk, but depending on how low your blood sugar is, it probably can be just about as bad. So you have to be really careful with this. And what happens a lot of times, it happens usually one of two ways. Number one is you've had diabetes for a very, very long time, like 20 plus years, 30 plus years. You've had your share of low blood sugars. And over time, you end up in a situation where you're basically just numb to them, right? Like think about if you do cardio, think about if you go for runs. The first time you go for a run, you run for a mile, like, oh my God, this is so hard. I hate this. This is terrible. Well, as you get consistent with running, what happens? Your body gets used to running a mile. Then you're suddenly doing 2 miles. Then you're suddenly doing 3 miles. And suddenly you look up and it's 6 months later and you're running 8 miles in one single sprint, not an actual sprint, but you know what I'm saying. You're running 8 miles in one shot. And as a result of that single mile, it does not seem like it's that big a deal. Similar thing with the low blood sugars. First, you're like, I'm in the 60s. I'm okay, whatever. I'm just in the 60s. Well, suddenly the high 60s turn to the low 60s, turn to the 50s, and potentially can go into the 40s or the 30s. And that can be a major problem for all of the reasons mentioned, especially because, God forbid, something happens and all of a sudden you have no idea. No one has any idea. You're acting completely normal. And then out of nowhere, if you have a seizure or something were to happen, no one has any idea why. And that is scary. So of course, we're in the day of CGMs, right? We're in the day of continuous glucose monitors, and great, they can be a massive helpful tool to preventing the situation from happening. Because think about it, right? You have a low blood sugar, but your CGM should still be able to read the interstitial fluid enough for you to know, all right, my blood sugar's low, I should probably treat this. Or, oh, my blood sugar's trending down. It may not be safe. I need to consider doing something and some sort of intervention so I don't end up with a low blood sugar. And if you don't have a CGM, of course, regularly testing your blood sugar is going to be extremely helpful for you in this situation as well. But it can be extremely scary. So that was one example that I gave, was that you had diabetes for a super long time and then you end up just kind of getting immune to it. The second way it can happen is if you are just used to having your blood sugars low all the time. And what I mean by that is you are running in the 50s constantly. You are running in the 60s constantly. And as a result of that, your body, again, has gotten used to it. But maybe you haven't had diabetes for 20, 30 plus years. Maybe you've only had it for a few years, but your body is so used to running low that low becomes the normal. This is the opposite effect of what happens when your blood sugar is really high for a long time and you're used to sitting at 210, 230, 240. And then when your blood sugar goes back towards a normal range and you're suddenly, 110 or 120, you have low blood sugar symptoms because your body is so acclimated to being so high all the time that suddenly, kaboom, you're in normal range, but it feels low. Similar situation, just this time, I would argue it's even more dangerous because at least on the way down, you feel the low blood sugar, you feel the symptom, maybe severely. In this case, your body's so used to hanging out at 55 that you don't feel any different and you're just used to it. And again, that is really not okay because it can be dangerous. And at some point, you could be just walking around, life is good. And a great example of this is my wife, Amelia. She works as an ICU pharmacist in a hospital, and she was there. I don't know, she told me the story. I don't know if it was a patient or if it was a patient's significant other, but regardless, there was a person who was at the hospital and they were having a conversation. She, I think, was in the room. She wasn't the main person dealing with the patient or whoever this person was. She wasn't dealing with them directly. And as a result, they're having a conversation. People are talking. Everything's great. Well, suddenly out of nowhere, the patient started to just not make a whole lot of sense. And they had tested the blood sugar and it was 29. Like, we're talking full-blown conversation. Everything was great. Everything was hunky-dory, and out of nowhere, they're 29. But it deteriorated like on a dime. And in that case, thankfully, they exhibited some symptoms because then they were able to check the blood sugar. But there's times that could happen and you have no clue. I remember way back I was in college even. I remember, and I don't, knock on wood, I typically feel my lows, but there was a time in college before CGMs were a thing. Well, before they were mainstream the way they are now. But I remember to qualify for a Dexcom or any sort of CGM, you had to have some sort of specific reason, whether it was hypo unawareness or something else. And I remember there was a time I was home, it was summer break. I think it was 2012, 2013. It was way back in the day. And out of nowhere, I tested before bed. I felt like everything was just amazing. And I was in the 30s. I was like 38 or 35 or something. And it was really scary. I fixed it. Everything was fine. But again, that can be extremely scary. So a few things you can do, of course, outside of having a CGM available. Outside of having it available, because of course, that's going to be one of the easiest and most effective ways to ensure that you are not dropping without your knowing that you're dropping. One thing, of course, obviously is have low snacks wherever you go. I don't care where you're going. If you're going to the gas station, the grocery store, halfway around the world, having low snacks with you at all times is going to be pivotal because if God forbid there is a problem or you have that kind of switch flip moment where everything goes from totally normal to, oh my goodness, what just happened? You have something with you and you're not having to run and scramble while you're already not necessarily the greatest state. So that would be one thing I would absolutely recommend. Again, if this is assuming CGM, no CGM, I would recommend having one. If you can get one, if you're able to, definitely get one. But in this case, regardless, having the low snacks on you will keep you, ultimately present. But another thing would be, and this might sound really over the top, but I still think it's really important. If you are at your job or in your, obviously, relationship, hopefully you've talked with your partner about it. But if you're traveling somewhere, if you're at your job, you don't need to share with the world, hey, I have diabetes, but someone should probably know. Because again, if God forbid there is a problem, there's at least one person wherever you may be that has an idea of what's going on. So again, whether it's a family member, you're at a family thing, whether it's somebody at work, whether it's someone at school, somebody knows what's going on. Maybe you're in school and you've got a kid in your class that knows. You're in college, you don't want everybody to know, but a couple people know that you happen to be friends with. so they can help intervene if, God forbid, there's a problem. Because somebody needs to be aware, because if you're not in a situation to be able to help take care of yourself, then someone needs to be able to jump in for you. Something else to consider besides the low snacks, you could consider, and I have not personally used what I'm about to share, but it is a possibility. Baqsimi, the inhalable glucagon, could be an option as well, because you're in a situation where it needs to be administered quickly. So again, that I believe there's ways to take a smaller than normal dose. Don't quote me on that 100%, but it's at least another alternative rather than pulling out the old, the old fashioned, let's put the liquid in, let's shake up everything, draw it out and then inject. At least this way, it's ideally a little bit smaller of a dose and it's a heck of a lot easier to administer. And then in addition with all this, and I'm not going to say that this next part is a must, but it certainly can help, is, for example, you may have heard, Amelia and I have trained our little buddy, Roscoe P, the little mini Australian Shepherd, to be able to smell my blood sugars. And we did that with the intent of just having an extra level of support, right? Because as much as a CGM is helpful, there are times where CGMs are not accurate or they're not accurate fast enough. Because remember, they're delayed by 15 minutes because it's reading interstitial fluid. It's not reading blood directly, which is why there are times where you may notice, wait, my CGM says I'm 155, but my blood says I'm 190 and my CGM doesn't even show me going up yet. Well, that's because it hasn't caught up. And so there have been instances, we didn't train Roscoe P for hypo unawareness, but there have been instances where the C tells me I'm 130, I'm 135, I'm living life, I feel fine. He is adamantly pawing me, and this is well documented in other episodes as well. He is pawing me, and I'm thinking, why are you pawing me, bro? And we've trained him for, respectful disobedience, so he doesn't stop. And I go test, and I'm 68. And again, he's trained with his nose for under 70. So if he's pawing me adamantly, he wants me to test. And so I did. He was spot on. He got rewarded. But instances like that, and I like to think I'm someone, knock on all the wood, where I'm not spending oodles of time low. I'm also someone that typically feels my symptoms. But even then, that's a situation where I didn't feel it. The CGM hadn't read it. The CGM in that case, if we're being honest, also was not trending down, but the dog was able to pick up on it. So again, I'm not going to say, oh, go out and go get a dog. Like, obviously that's a whole different level of responsibility. But if you have a dog or you're thinking about getting a dog, there are certain breeds that can do really well. And I will say, Amelia and I trained ours ourselves. There's organizations, amazing ones out there. MD Dogs is one of them that trains dogs specifically for families and people with diabetes. But there's other organizations out there as well. We used MD Dogs resources to be able to do that, to help train Roscoe P. And he was honestly smelling my blood sugar before he was fully potty trained, which is pretty impressive. I think it's a shout out to him and shout out to Amelia. I just was kind of there, right? But I just wanted to give a little bit of shine to hypo unawareness in general, because it's a topic that just gets glossed over. It's a topic that's forgotten, but it does impact so many people. And it also just gives more oomph behind when I will sound like a broken record and say, have low snacks on you, have low snacks on you, have low snacks on you. Because if, God forbid, there's a situation like this and you're walking around at 46, you don't want to have that where you're like, oh my goodness, I need to take this. And if you're not sure, like, let's just say you don't really feel your lows a whole lot, or you don't feel them at all, and you're thinking and you're on your CGM, I'm like, I don't feel like I'm 46. Verify with a finger stick. That's always a given. If you don't trust the CGM reading, as much as they say, oh, they're perfectly accurate, especially if it's in the first 24 hours, they're probably not. Verify with a finger stick, because the last thing you want is tells you that you're 46. I've had times in the first 12 hours, it tells me I'm low, like just low. And I'm like, there's no way I'm low. And I test and I'm 102. Like, that happens more often than you would think. So in a case like that, don't stress, but verify with the finger stick. Like I said, I had to give this a shout, not just because I had the conversation, but because it does impact people. It's very real. It can be extremely scary, and especially extremely scary, not just for the person, but for the people around them if they're not sure what to do. So really making sure that if this is you, ideally you have a CGM. If not, you're testing on a regular schedule. Some people around you're carrying low snacks. Maybe you've, trained your dog to say, hey, what's up? In the event that, if you have a dog, that something is going on, but really making sure that you are paying attention and, more importantly, you are prepared. So let me know if you enjoyed this episode. Definitely hit me on social media at Man of Zeal, MANOFTZEEL. Happy to hear comments, suggestions, other topics you'd like me to discuss on here. If you're loving the pod, whether you're listening on Spotify or Apple, please give a 5-star review. It would mean the world to me. And if you're looking for additional support on your blood sugars, where you're saying, hey, I don't want to have these lows, I don't want to have these highs, I want the best blood sugars of my life and diabetes to not restrict me in any capacity, My team and I are here to help. We're all registered dietitians. We all live with diabetes ourselves. We all have exercise backgrounds, and we may even take your insurance. So with that, I'll catch you in the next episode, and God bless.
Hope you're ready for the next episode. Hey.